Hi, Mr. Carlini here. We're out here today doing a virtual class. Um, we're with Graph Construction. They are a home building company. They're also a large excavating company. I believe they got into home building because of the fact that they were doing all the excavation for people, and then they ended up thinking, well, why can't we just do the rest of it? Um, so as you look around, yeah, let's move over here because the sun is killing us. Watch this mud.
Can I step on this?
Yeah, go ahead. Careful with that rebar. I think this is a good place to get started.
Yep.
So someone from the company is going to be joining us here a little later. If for some reason they show up later than what we had thought, we are going to record that part and put it out for next week. But the idea is to do it today. We're doing a job shadow experience. Mrs. Vano printed up those papers that I gave everybody the other day, or last week. So you should have that paper with you. If you don't, I'm going to, I'll get that. I'll post that on Teams for you. So what a job shadowing experience is when you actually usually go to a job, you hang out with the crew, or it could be one-on-one like that's the traditional way. Now we're doing it as a class. We've also done things in the past where we take a field trip and everybody just comes and sees the work that's going on. But today's going to be a little different. You're going to fill out this form as we have the interview with the contractor. Okay? So while we're waiting on them to get here, I wanted to go over foundations, and I'm trying to give you guys kind of big pictures this year because we're doing the virtual thing and we can't go long and deep like we normally do. But some of you started the other day striking lines on the ground, doing 3, 4, 5s, making things square. Now that's a really important part of the layout process. You have to lay things out square. You as the carpenter have the ability to make or break the job. Just because you have all the measurements, all the lengths right, never makes anything square. If your building is out of square, it actually makes the footprint of your building smaller. So if your building is all squared out, it's the biggest that it could possibly be. So first thing I wanted to do is I want to look around this job site and look at how neat that it looks. So let's turn the cameras and take a look. That we don't have a bunch of junk sitting around. We don't have, piles of scrap. We don't have the hillside where it's ready to cave in on the workers. Everything's excavated back properly. And these guys leave the job site, and yeah, they got mud around here. But when they leave the job site at the end of the day, they leave it looking neat. And we have a couple concrete panels just sitting here, but you know what? They're not really in a bad place where anybody could trip on them or anything like that. So, I give this job site an A for safety, for how things look and how neat it is. Neatness, as we always talk about, isn't always about just making things look good, because realistically, they're building a house here. Nobody lives here yet, so the homeowner isn't here. It doesn't inconvenience them to have a messy job site, but it does inconvenience the contractor, the people working on the job site, and it also is unsafe. So a neat job site is safe. So this company, they came in and they did a lot of excavation. So when we came up the road, we could see this was just a farm field. It's kind of got some slope to it. But they decided to build, whoever it is, decided to build the house right here on this spot. It's going to be a beautiful view. I mean, I'm looking out here and it looks like I would guess they're going to have a lot of glass on this side of the house where they can look out. They got some retaining walls going out that way. But what they had to do before they ever started this was lay out to know where to even dig the hole. So you just don't go in and start hogging out dirt and just piling it up. There's always a plan for that. This is recording, right? Yep, 5/18. Good. All right, so they come in and they use their surveying, their layout instruments, and they're going to lay this out. Now, what we're learning is small scale in class. We're learning to do 3, 4, 5s, or we're learning the Pythagorean theorem, and we're doing it old school, like, and I'm going to get into this when we get into the surveying instruments, like George Washington did. He's the most famous surveyor. He was a land surveyor, but he also knew how to lay out a building because it's the same as laying out a piece of property. And they take into account slopes, and they have to take level measurements when you have a slope, okay? And they also take into account the fact that they have to cut and fill. Cut and fill is a term they use where they cut dirt away from one place and they put it in another place, so you come to a happy medium where you're not totally digging off the top of a hillside and trucking it away somewhere. So the engineers come up with that, how much to cut out, how much to fill, and the guys on the job have to do the layout and have to get it right. And that's pretty advanced stuff. We will touch on that just a little bit this year. Where are we at? Excavation. So before they start excavating, they're going to put some temporary points out on the ground. They are going to use, there's not going to be guys out here with tape measures and pulling a 3, 4, 5 typically. Sometimes you'll see that, but on a job of this size, you're not going to see that. They're going to use a surveying instrument that actually turns the angle. It measures the distance. It does all the calculations for them. We have those types of instruments back at the school. If there's some of you that really get good at this and want to move on, I always make room for you to pull out those instruments and get the opportunity to start laying those out. That is a job in the construction industry that's a very high-paying job. It's called a surveyor, where you can go out, you don't swing a hammer, you don't do anything like that. All you do is lay out points on a job site for a couple hours, pack your stuff up, leave. Once they dig, you come back up, set up your equipment, and you lay out, do some more layout. So after they dig out all the spray paint and pegs that you put in the ground, now the surveyor has to come back in and lay out where the footings are going to be. So what are footings? So these right here are footings. And yeah, we're just getting into this, we're just getting into the foundation part. But the footing is a wide footprint that the building will sit on. And if you look around, it goes the whole perimeter of the building. And I guarantee you, you've never seen the footing on your house that you live in. And why is that? That's because it's buried whenever it's done. But the footing is a very important part. You have to be accurate in setting the top level of it. The width of it can vary a little bit. It can be a little bit sloppy as long as we meet our minimum widths and depths of the footing. So a typical footing, if we're putting a 10-inch wall on top of a footing, and this here would be our foundation wall. This would be the wall you're going to see in the basement, and this is going to come up a lot higher. The foundation wall, if this is a 10-inch wide wall that's going to be on top of here, your footing needs to be twice that width. So it would be a minimum of 20 inches. So your footing width is twice the width of your wall, and the depth of it is the same as the width of the wall. So if this is a 10-inch wide wall, this footing will have to be 10 inches deep. And that's a minimum. You could go thicker than that, and you could go wider than that. What does the footing do for us? The footing acts as a foot for the building. I could be out here in my work boots, and I could walk through the mud. Now, Mrs. Vano's here with us today, and she wore her stiletto high heels. And when she walked, okay, she didn't wear her stiletto high heels, but if she did, you know, I probably have 30, 40 pounds on Mrs. Vano. But if she were to walk through that mud, she would sink right down in. Why is that? Because there's more pounds per square inch, and it only makes sense. You know, you can You can push a nail in the ground real easy, but you're not going to push the end of a 2x4 in real easy. And that's because all that force is put on a smaller area. So the idea with a footing is to make a wider footprint than what the walls are, to distribute that weight over a wider area. In essence, it keeps the building from sinking into the ground. Okay, there's other things that come into play too. You have to build on the proper soil. You can't just build on top of, we'll say, soft topsoil. It has to be good, solid soil. And there's specs on that. I believe it's at least 4,000 pounds or 3,000 pounds per square foot that the soil can bear for you to be able to build on. If not, it takes some engineering, and you got to pull out some equipment, and you got to roll it in, and you got to put stone down and things like that. But that's more than we ever get into. So that's what our footing does. The other part of our footing is it's so important that it has to keep it below grade. And what we say below grade, what's grade? Well, grade is the surface of the ground that's out here. So we can see that the grade's probably up here, so the footings are going to be about 6 feet below grade. Here in Pennsylvania, we have, all over the country, we have something called a frost line. And the frost line is going to be, it depends on where you're at in the country, the frost line is how deep the ground freezes below the surface. So if you go out on a January day and you walk in your yard, it's rock solid. Okay, and it's actually pretty solid right here because they laid this stone probably yesterday or so, and it's got some moisture in it, and it feels pretty tight. Once it starts to thaw, it's gonna, kick around like gravel. But we build underneath the frost line. In Pennsylvania, we have a minimum of 30 inches. You have to be below the surface of the soil, and that goes to the bottom. The bottom of our footing needs to be at least 36 inches below the surface of the soil. Now you get somewhere in Arizona, they may only have a couple inches. It's very shallow. And they're looking at how far does the ground freeze at the worst winter. And you may have that crazy winter every 500 years that truly does freeze down to 36 inches. Me, through my experience, I've gone out and dug up the ground in January, February when we got a long freeze, and I've never seen it frozen any deeper than a foot below the surface. So that's just a little FYI. But the building code allows for extreme long, 100-year storms or 100-year freezes. So that's the specs on the footers. Drainage. Drainage is really important. You guys are getting a whole bunch of stuff. I normally drag this out over about 5 days. Drainage is really important for the outside of a foundation. Now, foundation is your basement walls, okay? To put it in other words. If you don't have a basement under your house, you still have what's called a crawl space, which is typically a small space where you crawl underneath the house. But you will have footers, and you will have foundations, and foundation walls, and sometimes they'll even fill this up. If this would be a garage, they would build this 36 or 30 inches deep below the surface, and then this would all get filled back in with soil, just like they're going to do up there. Yeah, absolutely. So there's the garage up here. They're going to pour these concrete walls up here, and then when that's all done, they're going to bring the soil, they're going to backfill it back up to the top of the concrete walls, and then they'll pour a concrete slab over top of it for the garage floor. But you can see there's still going to be at least, they're probably going to be 36 inches, 40 inches below the surface. So these guys are building to a high standard. They're going deeper than they need to go. Okay? But your foundation walls, let's get back to that. Your foundation walls, especially for a basement, they need to be waterproof. You hear those commercials all the time. People talk about, wet basements, things like that. There's a lot of companies that make a lot of money off of keeping your basement dry. It's a huge job to go back after a house is built and dig it all back up, the outside, put in the proper drainage, waterproof everything. So we try to do it during the building process. All right? So what they're going to do if you look around, the first step is you see this black fabric on the hillsides. So what that is that's a fabric to keep the soil from mixing in with the backfill. And what they're going to backfill these foundation walls, and I want you to understand that these little forms that are concrete forms that are around here, they're still going to probably go up 8 or 10 feet higher. They just set small forms on the ground. But the fabric is there after these foundation walls are formed and poured. They're going to dump gravel all behind here, and the fabric will cover over it, and it keeps the soil from mixing into the gravel and allows water to roll right down through that. Because when you get groundwater around a house, when water comes up against a house, it either has to go around or it will sink in. And when the water sinks in is where the problem starts to happen. So the waterproofing on this, and these guys don't have anything poured yet, but if we come over here,
Can you students do like a thumbs up or something so I know I'm doing okay with the video recording? Thank you. Thank you.
okay, thanks guys. So as we look here, we have the fabric here. This will be filled with concrete. These forms will be taken out at a later time. This plastic piece right here, they used that to form the foundation. This is called Formadrain. It's hollow plastic. They are tubes. They're pretty much square pipes that go the whole way around the outside of the building and the inside of the building. So this is the inside. And intermittently, I don't know how close together they do it, but intermittently, I'll say maybe every 20 feet, every 50 feet, they connect a piece of pipe between the two, between this outer Formadrain and the inner Formadrain. So if any water gets under the floor inside of the building, it goes into the Formadrain and it comes out to here. These eventually all go down to the low point of the house, and they will connect a drainage pipe into it, and it'll go down over the hill, and what they call daylight. It'll come out of the ground. So any water that gets down into here will work its way into the gravel, goes straight down in, and the gravel gives a quick, easy access for the water to quickly drain down through where it's not pushing against the foundation. It works its way into these pipes that have cuts in them. The cuts are actually lower than what you can see. They're down here. The water goes in it and finds a quick, easy way out of there. Also, the waterproofing is done on the foundation walls. So, it could be done with just merely putting a tar on the foundation. Most builders nowadays use a film. It's a real heavy film, very expensive but very effective. And they peel the back off and they stick it on. It comes like 4-foot wide sheets, and they stick it down the foundation wall, comes out across the footing, and goes over top a little bit. So any water that works its way down in has no way to go through the foundation wall and make your house wet. A damp house is more expensive to heat, and and once you get moisture in your house, in your basement, it causes mildew, black mold, and those things are actually bad for your health. Okay, so that's what we have on foundations. That's what we have on the waterproofing, and they don't have any waterproofing really going on here yet, other than they do have the Formadrains in place. Is our camera okay here?
Do you want to move it?
Yeah, let's go over here. I'm gonna get the So you know what I want to do? I want to walk up there because they have some things formed in, and we're gonna do. Oh, I want to talk about the rebar. Yep, forms. Okay. Now let's go ahead up there. We're gonna look at the.
To the driveway? I mean.
Oh, I'm sorry. They got rebar in here already. We're good. We're good. We can stay right here. I wasn't even paying attention. I like this. So the concrete forms, let's do it right here, and then we can do a quick turn up to there. So these concrete forms, there's a lot of different companies that make concrete forms. There's ones that have wood on the face and they have, you know, they're outlined in steel. These ones happen to be totally aluminum. They're reusable. We use them over and over again on a job. And there's a truck, that truck that we were showing at the beginning was full of concrete forms. It was just, you know, it was just loaded up. So there's probably not enough concrete forms to put 10-foot walls on this whole thing, but they'll probably do this in a couple pours, okay? So they got their base started and they put these forms in. Concrete has a tremendous amount of push. It will, it's a liquid when it's poured in, as we all know, but it has a tremendous amount of push that will push the forms apart. So if you can see these pieces here, these are called snap ties, and they have some over there. I should have grabbed the, there's one right there. So they have these pieces called snap ties, and as they put the forms in, they strike a line. They set the concrete forms to this line, and that's what the surveyor does. After the forms are poured, the surveyor will come out and they will put the pins in and they will mark all the corners. And the carpenters, the foundation people on the job, will strike lines, paint them in like they did here, and set the forms to that. Now this is a very, very accurate measurement that they set these to. They have to, if we pull a tape measure out, I would certainly think that our 3, 4, 5 triangle would work perfect in here. Okay, but they aren't using 3, 4, 5. They're using Pythagorean's theorem, and they're going from like this corner clear out to that corner, maybe 60, 70 feet away. All right, so
You mean the opposite end corner? Like
yes,
that
yes, and it doesn't have to be. Yeah, clear out to there. So we can go from this corner here, and we can calculate that based on how wide we're going and how far out we're going. Okay.
What's this
What's that
next
for?
to the paint?
That there, I'm guessing that's going to be some sort of column or something, because we do have a big footer right here. We have a big footing right here. We're standing on it and it got rebar there. I'm going to talk about the rebar here in a minute. But the concrete forms, back to that, how they go together is that there's pins that push through, and then there's a locking pin that pounds in. This is a really quick system, guys. You could, after you get this leveled out and set on the line that you want, they should actually, if they had enough forms, they could have this all formed up today and be ready to pour probably for tomorrow morning. It's just set, put the pins in, put some stiff backs on. Now let's talk about these. This is what keeps the whole thing from falling apart. If we were just to put a concrete form up on this side and a concrete form up on this side, as soon as you poured a concrete in, it would bow out and it would push over and fall over. So the snap ties go between, the pin goes through, and it keeps the two forms, they pull against each other. So that's what keeps them from blowing out. Yeah, we do have to put some bracing back into the hillside to straighten them all up, because once you get this up 10 feet, it's going to be a little bit crooked and wavy. So they'll put some turnbuckles and some braces on, and they'll get it all straightened up. When the concrete is poured and cured a couple days later, the carpenters will come back in, they'll take these forms off. Now when they take the forms off, they're going to see this little piece sticking out from the face of the concrete. Now this is why it's called a snap tie. They put a bar in here and they give it a twist, and it breaks off right there, and you have nothing, and then you have a flush wall. If you don't break them off, you have these sticking out at every joint. And this one has 2, and then there'll be like, you know, several more going up this line, several more going up this line. So that's why that's called a snap tie. Snap ties come in different forms, and I've used ones that are little round rods, but they all kind of work the same. They do the same thing, but they're specific for the type of form that you have. Take a look at these little grooves here, okay? They put those in there in order to set, now it's these 3 grooves. These 2 on the end here are where the snap tie will snap. It's a weak point. But these 3 grooves are to allow for reinforcing rods. So what are reinforcing rods? We call it rebar, and it's this right here. So this is rebar. This is number 4 rebar, and rebar is sized by the 1/8 inch. So if it's number 4, it's 4/8, which means it's a 1/2 of an inch. Okay. That one over there is probably a number 5 rebar. Now I bet that's a number 6 rebar, which means 6/8 or 3/4. And I saw some way down there that were probably 1 inch rebar down there in that retaining wall. So what does the rebar do? It strengthens the concrete. Concrete is only strong in compression when it's being pushed tight, okay? But when concrete is pulled apart, it doesn't have much strength. So they have to put rebar in the walls, and you're thinking, well, it's only in compression because the house is pushing down. That's not the only force we have on it. Once we backfill this with gravel and dirt, we have a lot of force pushing in on the building, especially on these long runs. When that happens, you have a force pushing in, and everybody's seen those commercials where you got the bowed basement walls. That's because of moisture out here and mud pushing against it. It'll push it in, and when the concrete's pushing in, the inside of the wall is no longer in compression. It is in, boy, what's that word I'm looking for? It's in, it's being stretched, okay? It's in tension, that's the word I'm looking for. It's in tension, so the outside of the wall will be in compression because the concrete's being pushed together, but the inside of the basement, the concrete's in tension, and that's where you'll get a crack. So rebar, what it does is it gives strength to the concrete that is in tension. And notice that they put the rebar toward the inside of the house because that's the side of the wall that's in tension. The footer, as they poured the footer, they had to put rebars down into the footer, and the footers have rebar that are, you know, you can see they're sticking up a foot or two out of the concrete, but they are L-shaped, so they sit down into the concrete of the footer. Okay, so this is going to tie everything together. As they put this, as they build the forms up, they're going to drop horizontal rebar in every so often, and the architect spec'd out what that's going to be. And they also have to have some vertical rebar every so often too. So that's what the reinforcing bar does. Whenever you overlap the rebar, it has to be overlapped a minimum of 10 diameters. Okay, 10 diameters is very minimal. So if this is 1/2 inch rebar, 10 times a 1/2 inch is 5 inches. The rebar have to be overlapped by 5 inches minimum. Most of the times you're overlapping them by a foot or two. Okay, so that's what we have on that. Rebar, concrete forms. Where are we at? Okay, so stiff backs and whalers. Once these forms are up, I already mentioned that, we are going to put a series of 2x4s. They are made, there's clips made that go right onto these concrete forms. That camera still good?
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
He has me working 2 cameras.
Okay, yeah. But as they build this wall up, you know, like I said, it's going to get wiggly. There's a series of 2x4s. There's clips that go right onto here that accept the 2x4. We put 2x4s every so often horizontally across here. It makes it stiff, it makes it straight, and they also put the stiff backs into the hillside, like I said, and they're gonna, you know, adjust those and make them right. As they pour the concrete, they have to adjust those because sometimes, you know, the weight of the concrete will cause this all to shift, and they need to, you know, make adjustments before the concrete sets. Because once it sets, you're not going to move that wall. It's done. And when they pour the concrete, you typically have a couple hours to work with it before it's too hard to do anything. Pouring the concrete, that's another area. When they pour this company has a concrete pump. They have a boom truck. It's got a boom like a crane. They'll pull it right up on the hillside there. It'll back the mixer truck into it, dumps concrete into the hopper. And I was hoping maybe they'd be pouring concrete. I know they are on one of their other jobs today. But their guys would get down in here. They would have a little scaffold built on the top of the whole way around the wall, and it's on a boom and has a hose, and they just fill this up. When they pour it, they just can't fill up 10 feet of concrete. That's too much weight at the bottom of this. It'll start bending the forms. It'll start actually breaking the snap ties. That's how much force that the wet concrete has. So they have to bring it up in lifts. And they'll come around here, they'll pour all this, they'll pour up maybe 3 feet at a time. Wait about it. They start here, they go the whole way around the building, about maybe an hour or so had passed till they got 3 feet of concrete all the way around. Then they'll come right back around and put another 3 feet off. If they fill it up too fast, like I said, it's going to blow up, so they bring it up in lifts. They're also going to vibrate the concrete. It's a tool called a vibrator. It's it's got an electric engine here. It's got a big, long, flexible wand, and the steel part on it. They drop it right down in the concrete. As they vibrate the concrete, it's going to shake out the air because we don't want air pockets in the concrete, and it's going to cause the concrete to fill all the voids, and it actually smooths it out pretty nice. And when they finish the top of this wall, all they got to do is hit it with a steel trowel real quick, and it's not a real intense finishing job. It's just kind of like wipe it off to your grade line. So where are we at? Next one. Okay, so that's pouring concrete, and that's, I just made that sound super simple and quick, but it's really not. None of this is super simple and quick, but it's highly technical. So after the concrete sets for a few weeks, they're going to come in and they're going to start backfilling it. And like I said, they're going to dump the gravel in. They're going to fill it up almost to the top with gravel. Then they'll top it off with some soil, and then they can plant their ground. But we have to, waterproof it, like I said, before we ever start that. Okay. I wanted to show this. I said that the footers, remember I said that the elevation of the footers is everything. It's got to be perfectly level the whole way around. But the width of it, we can vary a little bit. It can get a little crooked. And here's a perfect example right here. I'm standing here looking right down this footing of the wall. Check this out. You see how the footer looks kind of crooked right out in the bot right there? It bows out, and they missed their footer a little bit, because look at it. They got several inches of footer sticking out on this side, and then you look on this side down there, and get a little skimpy down on that end there. They only got maybe 2 inches of concrete sticking out. Not ideal, but is it the end of the world? No, not at all. It's still acceptable within industry standard. One thing I didn't mention about safety was excavation safety. I briefly mentioned it, but there's a standard for how this is allowed to be excavated out. So you're not allowed to have any higher than a 4-foot high wall of soil before it slopes. And it depends on the type of soil. There's charts you can look up, and whether it's A, B, or C soil. You'll learn that whenever we do OSHA 10 safety. But it has to slope up, and I don't know if you can see it there, but this soil does slope up, and that keeps it from, whenever it's wet, keeps it from falling in. So anytime you have more than 4 feet of a trench, it has to be sloped. Okay? And you never want to get in a trench that's not sloped properly, or you have trench shoring, and that's something, like I said, we'll go over that in OSHA 10. But I just wanted to point that out. So, what are we doing on time? Well, we're at about 40 minutes, and that's probably long enough. And we'll just walk around here real quick, and then we'll call it quits. But and it looks like our job foreman isn't going to make it yet. But
do you think maybe we can come back again?
Oh, we can come back. Sure.
The kids can see the progression of the.
Yeah, we certainly can do that. This tool here is a rebar cutter. You can cut rebar with a grinder. You know what? I'm going to cut a piece of rebar. I don't think they're really going to mind. So, believe it or not, this is about a $500 tool that they just got sitting out here in the ground. But hey, that's what it's made for. And we can take a piece of rebar, we just throw it in here. Watch the foreman pull up and be like, hey, don't be cutting my rebar. But this is an awesome tool. This isn't cheap steel, by the way. This is high carbon steel. You can actually make good knives out of this stuff if any of you guys are into that, but it shears it off. It's quicker than using a grinder. So I just cut a little piece off of that. And hopefully that little 1/2 inch ain't gonna kill their job. But that's all we have. Put that back. So yeah, I will come out one day when they're pouring concrete. Maybe next week we can go to a job where they're pouring concrete and doing that process, and maybe they'll be doing some waterproofing and backfilling on the same job. I'd said before there's not enough forms to do the whole job typically. So, you know, they'll build as much as they can with all the concrete forms they have. They'll bulkhead the end of it off. They'll pour that. They'll strip all those forms and move it to the next part of the foundation. So this may be a 2-pour job, or they may have enough forms and they'll pour the whole thing. I don't know. But this is going to be a great house. It's just, yeah. Can already see what it's
The
gonna be like.
view. That's
Yeah.
the garage, and then down here will be the basement, and then they'll be able to walk out to a patio.
That's what it looks like to me too. Like there's gonna be a nice patio out the back here. And we got these diagonal walls going out, and those are just gonna be these things right here are just going to be retaining walls to hold up the hillside. So you know they may be 8 feet tall or something. I don't know how high they're gonna fill this up, but man, look at the
This
size.
might be a patio and then out to a pool.
Very well could, yeah. Check out the size of this footer. So I know it's gonna hold back a lot of land in here, because this footer is huge. This is like a 4-foot wide footer. So they don't want this wall tipping over when they put all this dirt behind it. And that's a 1-inch rebar easy. That's huge. But apparently that's what they spec'd out for it, because it's gonna hold back a lot of weight. And then as they get down here further, it's not going to hold back as much, and they got some smaller rebar in there. But yeah, nice place. Okay, do we have any questions out there? No? Okay. One thing I did forget to mention, I did mention it, but I want to show you since I'm over here. These nails, we have a couple nails. We got one right here. Got one over here. And this is what the surveyor puts down. This is what the person is laying out the foundation. Yeah, they put pegs in the ground when they start the excavation, but then they come back out after the excavation's done. They'll give them marks to build the footers. After the footers are poured, these have to be dead on the money. They set up their instrument, and these, you could measure these 3, 4, 5. You could do Pythagorean theorem to any corner to make sure these are right. But this is what is going to set the rest of our building. And they set that point, they draw it in, and they drive a nail in. It's usually the day after the concrete's poured, and they can drive a nail right into the concrete when it's fresh like that. And they have them everywhere, and they spray paint it in their lines where they're going to build their building. So, okay. I guess that's all we have for today. I'm gonna ask you guys to stay on. I'm gonna get, you know what? I have a way of taking attendance. I'm not gonna, now let's do it. I'm gonna take attendance. Let's do it. Let me shut this camera off, and then I'm gonna excuse